Chapter 6. Misty, the Crazy Cat Lady. Mattie sped up the hill. Nate was a fast climber, but Mattie was almost gliding above the ground, so fast that Nate's lungs were burning with the effort of trying to keep up. He wanted to slow down, but there was no way he was going to let her get too far ahead. He didn't want to be left alone in the woods if Mattie's pa might be hanging around. So instead of asking her lots of questions, he concentrated on keeping up. He was surprised when she swung away from the circle of trees where he figured they were headed. Instead, she continued over the ridge and down the other side. Going downhill, he was able to catch his breath. "Where are we going?" he panted. "It's time you met another friend of mine," she replied. "Another ghost? Come on, don't do that to me again. Every time I meet one of your friends, they do something that makes me want to hurl or run." "Don't worry, Yellow Belly. Even you should be able to handle Misty. She's alive, and a little old lady. I'm pretty sure you won't go all twitchy when you see her. Besides, she's the only other breathy I know who can see me." They were approaching a big, run-down house that Nate realized was just down the road from his house. He was surprised how close the place really was when they went straight up one side of the hill and down the other. On the road, it seemed pretty far away. He had never seen the place up close since it sat way back at the end of a long dirt driveway. Like Nate's house, it was old and shabby, but this house felt different. At Nate's, the disrepair was because his mom didn't have the time or money to fix it, but this place looked like the owner wanted it to be exactly the way it was. Strange collections of all kinds of objects were carefully arranged all around the yard. Over 100 bottles of different colors and shapes were set to look like flowers under one tree, while a bunch more dangled from the branches, clanging together in the wind. In front of the house, a pyramid of stones sprouted dozens of long, thin poles that were covered with shiny metal decorations. The poles kept slowly bouncing and banging against each other with almost musical sounds, and the metal pieces caught the sun and shot off beams of light all around. There were piles of stones, branches, and mirrors laid out all over the ground which formed pictures and symbols. The house itself needed a paint job, but on all the sides and around the windows and doors there were symbols and patterns painted in greens, blues, and browns. There were pieces of wood and metal that had both painted and carved symbols nailed up all over the outside of the house. Some were as small as an envelope, and others were bigger than Nate. It was run down and totally messy, but it looked kind of cool, too. Everywhere Nate looked, there were cats. Cats at the windows, cats on the porch, cats sprawled in the garden among the early spring flowers. Nate hung back. He didn't know much about the town, but even he had heard of Misty, the crazy cat lady who lived here. Everyone said she lived by herself, was the oldest person around, and had been crazy since she was a little girl. Every morning, rain or shine, she walked to the store, always wearing a coat that was either bright yellow or bright green, a long striped muffler, and a scarf covered with flowers on her head. At the store, she would buy a package of cookies, a bottle of milk, and the newspaper, smile sweetly at everyone in the store, then walk back home. It was only a quarter of a mile, but she did it every day, even when it was snowing or storming. Nate didn't want to be in the same house with the crazy lady, and he certainly didn't want to just walk up to the door and try to explain that he was following his invisible friend. Who knows what she would do? Probably start throwing cats at him. However, Mattie walked up to the front porch and hollered, "Misty! Misty, come on out. I got someone for you to meet." The door opened slowly, and out stepped the tiny old lady Nate had seen walking to the store. Up close, he could see her blue eyes sparkling behind little round glasses. She leaned on a cane that was completely covered with symbols like the ones on the walls. She beamed at Mattie. "Hello, sweetie. It's been a while since you've come to visit." She peered around anxiously. "He's not after you again, is he?" Mattie shook her head. "Nah, not today, but he's been around. That's why I wanted you to meet Nate." Misty turned toward Nate and looked him up and down. Then she turned back to Mattie. "Why, I declare, he's a breathy, isn't he?" Mattie nodded. Misty's mouth split into a wide smile. "Why, that's fine. That's just fine. It's been a long time, and now maybe he can help before. That's what I'm hoping, Mattie said. But yesterday Pa seen him too, so's I'm afraid. Misty nodded. I understand. Turning to Nate, she said, Well, don't just stand there, young'un. Come on in and let's get you fixed up. You're lucky. I had an idea someone might be coming by, and I made molasses ginger cookies. They're still hot. With that, she turned and went inside, leaving Nate to hurry after her. He realized that Mattie was still outside, so he held the door. She smiled. That's right, nice of you, but doors don't cause me no never mind. Go ahead and close it. I'll show you. Nate let the door close, and a moment later, Mattie's head poked through the solid wood. She looked up at him and grinned. See? Doors ain't so much a problem. Looking at her head and shoulders sticking through the heavy door, Nate shook his head. You are definitely the weirdest friend I've ever had. Then he noticed a necklace with a small heart hanging around her neck. Poking her head through the door had made it swing free. He reached for it. What's this? She pulled back, her head disappearing back through the door like a chipmunk popping back into its hidey hole. After a second, she stepped through the door and into the room, standing straight, tucking the necklace back under her dress. Ain't for handling, she said. I don't like anyone else touching it. Got it from Ma. It's all I got left of her. There's even a little picture of her inside, but with the water and all, you can't hardly see it. Still, I recall it fine. I was wearing it when I died. Always wore it then. Always wear it now. Misty came back into the room with a plate full of cookies. She set them on a small table, brushed a cat off a chair, and sat. Sit down, boy, she said, pointing at a chair nearby. Just push Sammy off, but watch out. He tends to scratch a little. Nate saw that Sammy was a big, fluffy orange cat with a pushed-up nose. Sammy gazed at him with calculating eyes, obviously planning how to cause the most damage if Nate came near or dared try to disturb him. Nate took a step toward the chair, and Sammy hissed. Misty glanced over and barely flicked her fingers at the cat. Go on, Sammy. The cat immediately leapt off the chair and huffed away, smacking Nate's leg with its tail. Nate sat down and looked around. The room was filled with old, comfortable furniture. Everything looked like it came from different times and had different colors, patterns, and styles, but it all worked together to make the room feel very comfortable and friendly. Old pictures covered nearly every space on the walls. Some were photos, some paintings, some drawings, some were in frames, others were just taped or pinned up. All around the pictures, over the walls, around every window and door, and even in places on the floor, were painted and drawn symbols and letters from an alphabet Nate couldn't recognize. He had never seen anything like it. For protection, Misty said, breaking into his thoughts. When I was younger, I learned a lot from the librarian, Mrs. Snow, and some of her friends. Other things I learned from books and travelers. The rest I learned from trial and error. Nate wondered if this old lady was more than a little crazy. He was getting uneasy. What did she need protection from? Was she afraid of killer mice? Maybe that's why she had all the cats. Was it aliens? Something stranger? Misty laughed and spoke to Mattie. I think your friend is trying to figure out how to get out of here alive. I've seen that look before. I think he's afraid I'm going to eat him. Yep, Mattie said with a grin. He's looking at you like he knows you're cracked, but ain't decided if you got the tra-la-la, look, it's a fairy crazies, or the you got the devil in you so I gotta lop off your head crazies. She looked at Nate. It ain't protection for her, it's for me. This is the only place I can be well and sure Pa can't get me. There ain't no way into this house for him, and even if he got in, the signs would drive him out like he was on fire. He's tried, but he can't do it. Misty here is the only person who can make something to protect you from Pa. Nate looked back and forth between the old, strange lady and his young ghost friend. They were staring at him, measuring him, like he was supposed to say something important. What's his problem? He shouldn't be picking on kids, particularly not his own kid or someone trying to help her, Nate said. They both relaxed. Misty looked at Mattie. He believes you, and he's not going to run. He'll help. It's time you told him the whole story. Mattie looked like a scared little girl about to face the dentist. Would you tell it? She whispered. Misty pointed to the couch. I will if you sit down. You start pacing and I won't be able to concentrate. Plus, you'll scare the cats. You sit down and relax a bit." Mattie went to the couch and sat. Misty turned to Nate. "Have a cookie. They're still warm." Nate picked one up and took a bite. His eyes almost closed. The cookie was so good. It filled his head with a warm, sweet taste and a little spark of ginger at the end. It was the best cookie he had ever eaten. Misty saw how much he liked it, pushed the plate toward him so he could have some more, and smiled. She nodded and began to explain.